A Turkish S-400 radar just painted a hard lock on a U.S. Navy destroyer inside the Bosphorus Strait. The missile battery's targeting computer is live. The crew of the USS Donald Cook has 4 seconds before a P-800 Onyx anti-ship missile closes the distance from shore to hull. 4 seconds. That is not a warning. That is a countdown. And the man who ordered that lock was supposed to be an ally. What you are about to hear is what actually happened inside that strait, and why the Kremlin walked away from that confrontation permanently, damaged for reasons that had nothing to do with the missile that never flew. The USS Donald Cook is an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. It entered the Bosphorus on a routine Black Sea transit. The strait is barely a kilometer wide at its narrowest point. There is no room to maneuver, no room to accelerate. A ship that size in that channel is like threading a needle at 30 knots. One wrong move and the hull grinds concrete. The Turks know this, the Russians know this. And on this particular morning in 2014, both of them had an asset pointed at the same ship. The S-400 Triumph system that painted the Donald Cook belongs to Turkey. The Russian Su-35S flankers circling overhead are uninvited. To the bridge crew of the Donald Cook, the geometry looks like a coordinated ambush. A NATO ally holding a targeting lock, a Russian strike package overhead, a Bastion-P coastal battery on the eastern shore with its P-800s already warm. Put yourself in that captain's chair for a moment. Your ship cannot turn around. Your escape routes are 0. And your computer is already building intercept solutions for threats that outrange your immediate defensive options. What do? Here is what the Kremlin thought was happening. Turkey had finally cracked. Erdogan's government, furious over being ejected from the F-35 program and bleeding under U.S. sanctions over the S-400 purchase itself, had decided to use its Russian air defense equipment to humiliate a NATO ship in international waters. Moscow believed Ankara had chosen a side. Their side. They were wrong about everything.
The S-400 did not exist in a vacuum. When Turkey purchased that system, it accepted delivery of Russian radar architecture. Real Russian software, real Russian source code embedded in every targeting subroutine. Moscow's technicians were physically present inside the Turkish S-400 command vans, officially as technical advisors, practically as intelligence operatives. Their actual job was to harvest the Aegis radar signatures of any NATO warship the system locked onto and relay those parameters back to Iranian air defense planners who needed to know how to shoot down American aircraft. That was Putin's play. Turkey was the unwitting bridge. Except Turkey was not unwitting, not even close. Erdogan had been reading the board for 18 months. His government knew the Russian technicians were inside those vans. They knew what those technicians were transmitting, and they had built a plan to turn that access into a weapon. Not against NATO, but against Moscow. The S-400 lock on the USS Donald Cook was deliberate. It was an invitation. The moment a NATO warship is actively targeted by a foreign air defense system, U.S. electronic warfare assets are legally authorized to probe and attack that system's network architecture. That is standing doctrine. Turkey knew it. They modified their S-400 software to leave a specific access pathway open, a door that looked like a security gap, but was actually a funnel. When the Donald Cook's AN/SLQ-32 V6 electronic warfare suite fired back into the S-400's receiver, it was not just jamming. It was entering a building whose owner had left the back door unlocked. The Russian technicians inside the command vans thought they were watching the Americans scramble. They were watching themselves get robbed. The EA-18G Growlers assigned to cover the Donald Cook's transit synchronized their jamming transmission with the ship's own EW suite at 0314 hours. The combined electromagnetic pulse they aimed at the S-400's processing core was not a brute force attack. It was a surgical insertion, a ghost kernel, a self-replicating piece of code disguised as a routine firmware update from the Russian manufacturer. Inside the vans, the screens went dark. When they came back, the targeting displays showed something the Russian technicians had never seen on one of their own systems: the seal of the United States Navy. For 14 minutes, every S-400 radar return in that network was compromised. The system's own search radar, the 91 N6E Big Bird, began broadcasting its GPS coordinates on an unencrypted civilian maritime frequency. It was advertising its own location to anyone with a radio receiver. The Su-35S pilots, above the Bosphorus, lost their data links simultaneously. Their cockpits flooded with failure warnings. The Bastion-P battery on the shore lost targeting coherence. The entire Russian-built kill chain, from the coastal battery to the fighters overhead to the command vans, collapsed inside 60 seconds. The Donald Cook cleared the narrowest section of the strait while the Russian network was still rebooting. But the operation did not end there. It had a second layer that Moscow still does not fully understand. Because the S-400 purchased by Turkey shared a communication architecture with Iranian S-300 batteries through a Russian satellite relay, the ghost kernel traveled the link. 14 minutes after the vans in Istanbul went dark, Iranian Air Defense Command centers in Tehran experienced the same blue screen failure. The Bavar 373 systems and the Russian-supplied S-300 PMU-2 batteries flickered out simultaneously. Iranian commanders staring at their screens saw the same anger. That window was not wasted. 4 RQ-21A Blackjack reconnaissance drones launched from the Donald Cook's flight deck at low altitude crossed the Black Sea on wave-top approach and reached a specific logistics annex in Russian-occupied Crimea, a facility where crates marked with humanitarian aid insignia were being loaded with components for the 3M-22 Zircon hypersonic missile program.
The drones captured serial numbers, loading manifests, and thermal signatures of the personnel present. One drone was lost to a burst of 30mm fire from a Pantsir S-1 on egress. The data was already back aboard ship. Washington now had photographic evidence of Russia using civilian shipping channels to deliver hypersonic missile components to Iran. Evidence acquired, legally, during a transit of the Bosphorus that Moscow had tried to turn into a humiliation. Russia left that confrontation believing Turkey had made a clumsy provocation. They did not understand what had been taken from them. The source code extracted from the S-400's kernel-level architecture during those 14 minutes gave Western engineers a detailed map of every radar frequency, every processing logic tree, every defensive countermeasure built into a system Russia sells to 23 countries. Every S-400 on Earth became slightly more transparent that morning. The Donald Cook continued its Black Sea patrol. The crew stood down from general quarters. The ship's radar swept the horizon. Not a single missile had fired. Not a single shell had left a barrel. And the most expensive air defense system in the Russian export catalog had been turned into a data source, a beacon, and an open door, all in the same 14 minutes. So here is the question that matters now. Russia knows something was taken from them inside the Bosphorus. They do not know exactly what, or how deep the access went. Does that uncertainty make Moscow more cautious the next time Turkey requests a joint exercise near NATO shipping lanes? Or does it make them more aggressive? Because an adversary who suspects they have been penetrated and cannot confirm it is the most dangerous kind. Drop your answer below. And if this is the kind of briefing you want before the mainstream news catches up, you already know what to do. Next time, we go inside the one mission that permanently changed what Iran thought it knew about its own airspace.